All right, welcome everyone to another blast furnace, first blast furnace for the year. I can't recall what number we're up to, but we're getting close to 30. Only two new faces tonight, so I'll take you through basically the standard spiel for the blast furnace. So basically, we run these events once a month. It's on the second Thursday of every month. And effectively, it's these three core features. So we have what we call the code section. We have a presenter come in and talk about some topic, whether it be software or some specific piece of hardware, even more high level, maybe just concept in general. They'll present on that, talk about that. We then at 7:30, we'll have a pizza break, and that's where we get a chance to meet. That's the meet section. Have a chat for half an hour, have some pizza, usually a good networking opportunity. And then in the last part is the collaborate, generally a bit of a hands-on, get your laptops out, have a crack at implementing or utilising the skills that might have been talked about in the code section. Sometimes the code and collaborate sort of blur together depending on the pace of the presentation, but that's generally the structure of the nights and how they roll. So, as always, we start with a bit of a thank you for the support. So the STEM Industry Schools Partnership Program sponsor the event. So they cover the pizza and the drinks, and Dashworks Makespace give us the space to use. So on that note, the bathroom's behind the false wall there in the foyer, and the exit is the entry in case of fire or emergencies. So tonight we're going to be listening about design tips for software design and branding, and that's going to be presented to us by Luke Burness from BrandSynth. So he'll give you a bit of an introduction about himself, but it should be good. Bit less technical than we usually do. Bit more of that. I think that part that a lot of engineering-minded folk like myself struggle with is making software look good. So hopefully we'll get some insight into that tonight. Next month, still ironing that one out. I usually like to be a month ahead, but I haven't been organised enough for this particular event. But on the cards are potentially a bit of a look into some new tech that's being built in the area. So I've got a presenter earmarked for that, and otherwise a bit of an intro into some advanced parts of Python, but we'll see which one of those play out. If you want to support the event, you'll see some of the guys like myself wearing the shirts around. They're $10. Let me know if you want one, and we basically take that money, feed it back into paying for the running costs of the event. And if you do want to take a picture, feel free to, and they're just the media handles to tag us in if you do. Also the Wi-Fi credentials if you haven't already logged on. All right, I'll pass it over to Luke to take us through it. And we're on live as well, so you'll hear. Now we might get questions online as well, so Al will feed those to you.
Sweet.
Don't be on the front page. Although that would get a lot of attention. Well, yeah.
Hi, I'm Luke. We're not going to code, sorry. But thankfully,
You can wear it.
we can wear it. Oh, kind of like, okay, let's wear it. Thankfully, my co-founder and I released a piece of software a couple of weeks ago that is quite interactive. Oh, my collar's so thick. I'm just going to hold it. Okay, right, it's designed. Okay. A piece of design software that automates design. So we're going to muck around with that later. But essentially, when Cam asked me to maybe come and talk to you guys, it's the context of this is probably like Cam alluded to there, like building some software, don't really know how to design stuff, and designs this like weird ethereal thing that it seems impossible to get right a little bit. And even when you beg, borrow and steal sort of parts, it's hard to put it together. And so I really like lean, easy to follow rules for that type of thing, and you can get very pragmatic with design and dive into it, but actually there's some really simple rules to follow as well, just to keep things on track. This is me. I thought I'd just do a quick intro to myself, but like, essentially my work career has gone, I worked at a printer, I learned how to be a regular graphic designer, designing quickly. I went to McDonald Jones Homes, where I did more print design, larger scale and smaller scale. I then sort of jumped out and was part owner in a design studio, and then I started getting more technical with my design. So I learned web design and development, and yeah, picked up the HTML for Dummies book around that time, trying to bridge that gap between design and code a little bit. During that time, there's a local startup called Social Pinpoint that we're in the co-working space with, and I fired up a relationship with them, and I've been working with them ever since as they've grown and gotten much larger, and through that was able to start product design. So I've designed their marketing and their entire product from the ground up, which is great sort of learning ground for me, and they let me do lots of stuff, and they have multiple tools in that, so that was really cool. And then through that, the last couple of years I've been really focusing on that product design thing and done various projects in that, and that's really what I like. And then that led me to look for my own startup and met a co-founder and have started something there, so that's really cool. I'm really excited about it. I get to design software and it's in the design space at the same time. So that's kind of me. I'm the graphic designer that's moved into as far into code as I can kind of get while still being a designer. And so let's have a look at a bit of that. So this is brand synth. We'll have a look at this later. It's up for us to all have a go at. So I won't dive into it straight away, but what brand synth is it's automated design. And its purpose is to keep you on brand and consistent all the time. So you put in your logo, colors, fonts, and imagery, and your taglines, some information, and we take all these bits, have a look at what you've given us, analyze them like I would if I was doing it manually, and then generate designs based on that with heuristics and rules of thumb, as you can kind of see in that screenshot. It's probably, you guys can see it. And the second thing we do is produce all of those in exactly the right format. So print, email signatures are in code, letterheads are in Word or print as well. Social media profiles are all exactly sized right, that type of thing. It's all completely automated, really the ethos is like, what would you get if you worked with me? You'd get some design sensibilities, some good design, and then the right file to use it. And so the software aims and does do that. Excited to get into that later. So in terms of product design, one of the first things if you jump online and have a bit of a look around for how to do it, you hit up against Atomic Design, or not up against it, you find Atomic Design Principles by Brad Frost, which is awesome. It's like a great set of principles, and it's actually like an entire workflow. And so who hasn't heard of it, or has anyone heard of it? You haven't heard of it? Yeah, so the basic principle is like you move up through atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, and pages. And so the idea is that you break things down into smaller and smaller components. So an atom is a button, an input, a selection, a lozenge, a tag, that type of thing. And then you move up, and so a card design might have a title and a button and have a wrapper, and so it's a molecule, and then that goes inside something else, and then we can build up sections. So an organism might be the sort of left-hand panel of an app or a website that's built up of those parts, and then ultimately you get up to your pages. And the goal of this is consistency, and it really feeds into good user experience and a good UI. That once someone has interacted with some of the molecules and organisms and the template and the pages change, they feel familiar, they know what to do because everything's interacting and moving the same. But if you're doing your own project and you're doing all of it, and you read this, you start to think, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that, because this is like, hey, you get the design team to do this bit and then get the UX team to do that bit, and it's very high level, it's for big teams, and so what do you do? And my answer is cut out the middle. Just kill the middle part, because all the value, in terms of a lean sense, all the value is right up at the atoms. Like the atoms hold the consistency part right there. If you focus on those and refine that element, and then just pull all of that into your pages, because you can inherently do the middle bit yourself a little bit. As you build your application, you will maintain that consistency, like navigation and viewport, where you put the view in your app just becomes a bit consistent inherently. And so the atoms are a place where you can have a go at them, but then refine. And so as much as possible, I tried to do like visual examples here tonight, because I know that we're all not going to jump on a computer and design, so I tried to make it visual. This is just an example, like I just pulled this online, but this is an example of like what atoms look like. And so you can see across this app, like already, obviously there's the white and the orange and then a little bit of blue. And so there's choices around when to use those. But with this set palette, you're already holding the consistency right there. And things like the type hierarchy from H1 all the way down to the smaller ones, that relative size is very important, and that will bleed across the entire app. And then what you can do is imagine making an application with this set of atoms. You come back to this set of atoms and tweak some of this stuff, and your whole application starts changing from there. And really, most of the tips I've got tonight is around that idea, is like, let's refine this and come back and change them and build it in a way that you can change them, because it's the easiest way to make some rapid improvements. And so really what I'm saying there is, react when you're putting together the software. If you get to a screen and it doesn't look good, what you do is react to the caveats, react to the little bits that don't look good. Don't sort of start every screen and try and get it perfect. That's kind of the idea. So yeah, we can see this all right, that's good. So this is like, obviously this is very abstract at the moment, but here's a bit of a screen, and on the left are sort of just the button styles that we have, right? So we put a screen together, we've got a title, we've got some settings over next to the title, and then we've got a bunch of stuff over up here on the right. We've got one primary and some other stuff you could do, and then a bunch of cards in the middle, right? So each card has a blue button. There's a bunch of blue buttons up the top, and there's one green one. So it's not too bad, because the green one says like, hey, I'm the green one. You should totally look at what I'm doing. And the settings one is like pulled back because it's grey. And so it's sort of there, and you might find it if you get confused and you're looking for it. But there's all these blue buttons are just like all over you and screaming at you. And so what could you do? So the next step might be, I'll just flick back and forth here for a sec. So I add another button to my atoms. And this is where like growing the atoms can actually help way up in the page section. So I add another atom, and I've taken the settings one and dropped it way back. And then I took all these ones up the top that in this scenario, let's say this app, they were sort of more secondary, right? The cards are more important. So they've stayed in what we might call the secondary button, the second most important button, because we want the person to interact with those. And then we've taken all these other ones up the top and given ourselves that grey style to use there. So they might be like, you could imagine that's like export over here or share or something. They're sort of like third tier things, whereas we want to interact with the cards. And so if I do that again and just change, these two are basically the same level of complexity, I could say, but I'm just shifting the focus. So in this one, I've said, well, actually, maybe we don't interact with the cards, and whatever it is I'm doing in this screen, the top right is obviously most important, but I've got a bit of an A and a B option that I might want to do whatever this application does, right? So the cards now have like one of the least impactful buttons. I've got some other options up there, and they're all pushed way back, and I've really focused up on the top right. So it can be really helpful to extend the atoms out. Like you see it a lot where you have like two buttons and then those two buttons go everywhere. That's basically the crux of this, is like you can extend that out, and then you've got more hierarchy in the button styles to then lead the user up at a page level. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. So that's like a really clean example. And you can imagine as the UI gets more and more complex, the levels at which those blue buttons might just start appearing everywhere, or the grey ones, for instance. Like if there's just you can interact with heaps of stuff, it just becomes too much, and so it's hard to find a way to start minimizing that, or helping lead the user back to the main bits and then let them find their way down to the second and third tier interactions. So if I just like flick between those. So the next most important thing, which really feeds back to what I was just saying there, is like hierarchy. There's two principles I'm going to talk about, and the first one is hierarchy. It is the main thing in all communication design, like designing anything, and then especially in applications. It is one of the best levers to help lead your user around. And the main rule here with hierarchy is to only use one of the hierarchical dials when you're choosing how to put hierarchy in something. And what I mean by that is you've got a few things, a few of the main ways to inject hierarchy in something is size, color, location, spacing, and then combination, which has an asterisk because with great power comes great responsibility. This is the, like, if someone sent you an email and they really want you to read it and it's got giant pink letters, that's them using size, space, and color all at once. And you just think, I would have seen it if it was like 2 points bigger, like I totally would have read it. So we can do the same thing. So as we move across, this is the sidebar menu in BrandSynth, so I've just used that because I had it. But the first one here, so this screen's a little bit far away, so I'll try and point it out. But the second set of document list is smaller, right, than the top one. Yeah, I should cursor on here, that's a good idea. There we go, okay. So these guys are like 2 or 3 points smaller than this one. Some of this might seem a little bit subdued up on this projector at the moment because this is something that you would see on your computer. So obviously the details would be a bit more impactful on you. So the next one is color, like simply, so they're back to the same size, but I've pulled out the icon colors. The third one is location. So in this scenario, I've said, well, the brand editor is the thing I really want the user to try and find. So I've just pulled it outside of the form, both of the menu forms, and I pulled it right up to the top and I've sort of surrounded it a little bit. So I did add some styling there to that, but I've moved it outside of its location, and that sort of styling I had to add to help it hold its space. And the next one is spacing. So I sort of generified all of the styling, so it's actually quite a lot plainer, but I've increased the space between these two sets, and I added a divider as well, which is something you couldn't do, but that space does a lot. Which is actually the next principle we'll talk about. And then the last one is all of those things added together. And so these all look quite similar, probably overall, but the way that you would interact with them would change quite a bit once you're using an application with some of these things shifted out. And I guess maybe I was a bit subdued in some of these as well. You could go a bit over the top by doing some of these, because if you take any two of these and sort of combine them, it would just be a step too far. So the main thing with hierarchy is pick something you're going to do, if it's size or color, and just do it in the most subtle and meaningful way you can apply it, and it is very powerful. If you're doing that right, this is just... I was on my lounge, thought this was quite funny, but just if you squint at the screen, that's where hierarchy, you'll see hierarchy. Like, I have this as a designer, I don't get this right all the time. I'm like sitting at something, I'm inside it, I've looked at it for too long, I no longer see it. It's like, I can't have a first impression of it anymore. And squinting is actually a good way to do it, because you're just blurring out what the hell it is you're looking at, and that's, the hierarchy will start showing you what pops out of that. And just to illustrate that, I pulled out a screen from Confluence, like this is a Confluence UI, and you don't have to squint, but you can see that if you did, the blue bar just jumps straight out at you, right? That's what they want you to know is there. And it's actually interesting because it's sort of a lot of utility, but not immediate utility in terms of the content that you've got. And then this grey bar pulls out as one of the next things, because it's obviously got an icon and a couple of things, but it has all this space, and space is actually a massive tool in UI, because look how important this stuff looks because of all the room it's been given, or they haven't filled up this set, because it's like, no, this space is set aside for really important stuff that you're going to want to see. And then I guess the content could change in here, but obviously the title and the icons start pulling you into those. So as you read them, you would jump around them. So yeah, I thought, like, I was trying to think of, like, how do you know if you've got hierarchy right? And it's really that, like, if you blurred out this screen and what are the bits that would jump out at you, the text would basically go away. That's kind of the first thing. And then what else would it be that's jumping out at you? So a little example of that. So the second thing that obviously is like a bit of a sister to hierarchy is Gestalt theory. And you could look this up, like there's lots of much deeper and better content on it, but they're really useful things to know. And it's a little bit similar, but it really is about, it's not about hierarchy specifically, it's about the groupings and how powerful that can be. And you have a few levers that you can pull to group things. And so these little dots here are sort of trying to show you that, the first one is color, and the second one is type, and then the third one is color sort of against the type. So even though the shapes are changing, you go, yep, there's 3 groups of things there because of that, the power of the color, grouping those together. So these examples are kind of good because they don't have any hierarchy in them. They're sort of basically all the same, but the color is taking care, or the shape in the middle one, but then the color is taking care of that grouping in the next ones. And these are some more examples of that. And it's interesting to look at because you just, like, it's a subconscious thing. It's the way that you see things and then group them together. It's a lot like when you're doing text, and when you read text, people read the shape of a word, not the letters. So it's exactly that, and it's a very ingrained thing that people just do automatically, and you can use it to help put things in the right place for them. And so it's not squinting for this. It's really about like what's shouting in the UI the loudest, because when I've worked on things with other people, I just often get like, well, this is important, we need the person to see it, and then this is important, and everything's important, and it's an impossible thing to have everything be important. And so a way to think about that is just think about what's shouting at me to look at it, what wants me to look at it. And like in the Confluence example, that blue bar is just taken over the whole time. And I think what happens with that is you just ignore the blue bar after a while and everything else is in the content. But it's pretty bold, like, and you see that a lot in apps. It's like this massive bold navigation, and it's a nice thing because it outlines it really clearly. But if your navigation isn't high frequency in your application, then maybe that's not quite the right way to do it. And that kind of brings me to, this is a idea that I had a little while ago. So it's sort of untested necessarily, but here's an idea I had. And I thought, as maybe there's a bit of an engineering bent here tonight, you might like some rules. So I've got an article on Medium that explains this in depth, but I've just pulled out the main images from it, and I'll explain it to you. But I was trying to figure out the problem for product design. The problem with design for me is that I sort of sit here crafting this little thing, but it's often in a different language than it's going to get produced in. And whilst I'm trying to get better at code to close that gap, it doesn't really matter. There's always this gap, and things change when it gets into production. And especially if you only have atoms and you haven't done all that molecule work, and because you can't, if you've only got atoms, then how do you make choices into the page to make sure that there's a consistent feel and some sort of some rules about what you're doing? And so my idea was is to have a choice matrix around some of these things. So this is a button choice matrix. So you would score it on, is it important? Is it used frequently? And its utility, basically. And those all probably seem slightly similar, or maybe importance and utility are, but you know, we know in apps there's all sorts of things that you can do, and they've got different stages in the workflow, and so they're not quite. So the idea is you give it a score, and then that score throws it on the spectrum, and you just pick. And so you don't ever do like a subjective choice during your application, and you build, like, you know, the idea is that you would just follow this and do the whole thing, and then adjust the atoms if you needed to, or adjust maybe the choice matrix, obviously. But you can kind of see that it's not too dramatic, but it's skewed. Like, it's mostly grey, basically. Like, and then the blue buttons have got an icon or not type thing. But the idea would be you could skew that really heavily or not, and it would completely change the sort of feel of your application, especially visually. But then also, like, how important are you? How many important interactions have you got to pull out? And so down the bottom, we've got, like, you know, cancel, a save, and a publish. So there, it's pretty clear. You probably could have guessed which button to do, but yeah, you can see the concept is there. And then you can extend this to the other parts of the application. So I've got checkboxes and toggles and radios and drop downs. So if I ran through this, do I need to select more than one option? Yes. How many options are there? Under 10, over 10, over 50. Okay, so over 10, right, it's drop down with checkboxes, right? And so you just follow that. And so you could plug in different UI selections into the bottom of these. But some of this thinking up front can really help you just flow through and make an application, and and it would keep it consistent. Because the user knows, like, oh, I'm about to pick like a bunch of stuff, I'm definitely going to get this. I mean, maybe a massive page of toggles isn't the best thing, but they would know that, they would get that. And so that consistency and the meeting of their expectations is really useful in UX. So yeah, that's an idea I have. That article's online. So, you know, if you're interested in that idea, have a bit of a look at it. But like I say, just an idea I had. And to me, this is just stuff that designers do inherently, because this, you know, this is our way of abstract thinking and trying to have some structure. And I was trying to think of a way just to get it out and put it out somewhere else. And so that's, yeah, what I came up with. Which leads me to, like, the other thing I'm always talking about when I'm doing software design is like trying to have a healthy pessimism for users, because like you can get feedback and you can watch people use your application and they just do not know what they're doing, and you basically most of the time have to know that it's your fault. Like, it's your job to design the thing, right? And so, but as you're designing it, the assumptions are the problem, not like, you know, I don't want you to think my user's really dumb, I have to do them, but you can't assume they're going to know every little bit. And that's the problem with designing something, is you know it from inside out, and you're too close to it to have an objective opinion. And so just stepping back and having a healthy amount of pessimism for that user and go, well, hang on, do they know that this even is the navigation for this section, or there's a parent-child, you know, relationship between these two things, like this one controls this entire view or not. Like, you can't assume those things, and it's nice to step back and pretend that you don't, and make and build up from there, because then you make it idiot-proof. Yeah, so healthy pessimism is a good thing. And so here's a brand synth example. So like, this is like last week we changed this. So here's a real life failure. So this is brand synth. So this is one of the main views that we have, and each document sort of follows this pattern. And on the left, we've got, as you've already seen, some settings and then some documents. And what you do in brand synth is you go to the brand editor, which is a completely different view, to edit your brand stuff, because that's quite complex, and then you come back into the documents and we've made all the designs and you can pick them and stuff. And you can also make a new brand. So there were two things that we thought were really important, and we want people to know that they can edit their brand a lot and muck around with it, see what they get, and also that they can make multiple brands and muck around with it, or if they have multiple companies, like we can handle this inside the app. So we started with this, some menu items like you see, and we went, okay, we'll move them up and we'll put the main one in green and the second one in blue. You can probably see my design styles like blue and green. But they're the main things, you can't miss them. So our application top left is like, there's the brand you're on. The next thing down, you can edit it. And the next thing, you can add another one if you want. And then here's all the settings for that brand contexture underneath. And we've just watched people try and edit their brand and float around looking to try and figure out how to do that. And they can't find it. And I think it's hard to know exactly, because you ask people, but they do these things inherently. And this is a grouping problem, I think. We move them out of the group. Like, they look around at the settings and they're looking for settings and it's not in the settings. And so they can't find it. They go, okay, well, I can't find it. Like, that's done. It's not far out, but it looks too different and it's moved out of its location. So you just put it back where it should be with all the other settings, and it turns out to be much more discoverable. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that failure, because I didn't want to pretend like I get this right all the time. And I think it shows how the application of some of the atoms, or choosing which atom to put, you know, what is the thing, like what type of input is it even, can drastically affect the application. Yeah, so there's that one. So you'll see that tonight when you have a look at it. Some usable tips. So these ones are more like some very literal rules for some UI stuff, which I thought might be useful. Some other developers that I've worked with like it when I just say, don't do this and do that. So here's a couple that I really like. Stack your shadows. Not every application uses shadows, but you can stack box shadows in CSS, and it is drastically different. Probably not coming up too well on the screen here. It's going to load a bit better. Yeah, but the top one is just one big flat one. That's what you see all the time. And the bottom one, and you'll kind of pick up, like, this is one of the things that you'll pick up on an application, like it'll just look really slick and you might not be sure why. And a lot of the times for me, it's the shadows are stacked and they've done a lot better job at defining these areas in a much more subtle way. And so really what it does is it just gives you if you look at those values and if you know how to read them, they it's just a really tight one to make sure that the shape's defined, and then a couple of slightly bigger ones to really just give it a bit of contrast off the background. But it makes it such a massive difference. So yeah, give that a go if you've got something that has a shadow in it. The next one is no black. Just hard black is just, it's too harsh, man. It's not often that a UI like wants to be edgy. Like, you could use black if it made sense, right? But it's not often that you want that. You want it to be like an easy to read thing. And so just pulling that slider up, a blue shifted black is really good. I have put the hex codes there for that one. But if you look at this on a color wheel, it's just pulled up from the bottom, and you can see, like, you can kind of clearly see how light that is. You could bring it darker again, but there's a lot of bandwidth in that little slider before you get to black, and it makes it much nicer to read everything. And if you do, that's not just for headings. If you do that for every piece of type that you have in your application, you'll just drastically change the entire feel of it. It's a good one. The next one is non-standard fonts. Like, this is probably a bit of a designer thing. Like, you know, designers love fonts, but there's so many high quality fonts out there now that you can use. And the great thing about fonts is that they only slightly change in their character. Like, there's very minimal change. Like, those top two, look how similar they are, but they just have slightly different characters to them. And it's these slight differences across an entire application that can really make a big difference. And especially, like, you know, in BrandSynth, we've chosen to use a serif font, which is not that usual for software, but that, like, these are some of the choices I've made to be like, well, you know, it's not just, it's not just a piece of software. It's sort of like, it's injecting our brand into the UI as well. But yeah, non-standard fonts, like, I mean, Google Fonts is there, an easy thing to get. And so if you're not sure how to pick one, go to Google Fonts, hit popular, because it's based on usage, because they link to access them. Go to popular, scroll down like past the first 40, because they're the ones that you see all the time, and then pick from there and just give it a go, because there's lots of great stuff, heaps of great stuff. And then the last one is a similar piece of advice, like icons. Like, people get numb to the things they've seen all the time, and so yep, you throw Font Awesome into your application, and that's fine, but like, there are other options that are open source and actually nicer. Like, Font Awesome's fine, but it's just, I can see it. Like, you guys can probably see it when you see an application. Like, yep, that's Font Awesome, but you can lift and change the entire feel of a piece of software. And I don't mean just aesthetically. Like, obviously these are aesthetic things, but they are all speaking to the style of application you have and how useful it is to navigate around. And so whilst it's mostly aesthetic, all these little choices build up into how easy is it to use, how easy is it to read, and what am I projecting at the user when they look at me. It's a lot like the branding seeping into the product a little bit more. And so I thought what I'd do, we had the BrandSynth UI just before, but let me just go back a step. I wanted just to maybe just talk about why I put things where they are a little bit. So certainly not a out there UI, but everything has been considered and has a place. So in BrandSynth, everything you see is your currently selected brand. So it is top left, and the first thing that you see. We didn't put our logo in the top left. We had to put it somewhere, and it landed in the middle up the top right. But if I needed to put something, I'd totally kick that out. But everything is contextual from that top left thing, and we read, you know, left to right, top to bottom, and so that's where it lives. It's the most important place. And then following along from the top, classically, this is where we find our account. And other settings that will affect everything I see below this. The left-hand side menu, classic place to have it, but then tucked underneath that is, depending on your stage of sign-up or purchase, you know, we've got an upgrade path or anything else that we want to tell you. And then as we move into the view, we make sure to have a bold title. When you export something, you need to have it selected, so our selection area is absolutely the main thing. We have options directly under the thing that it's going to affect. The download or export button is, you can see here, it's demanding quite a bit of clear space. And that's on purpose. It could be up next to this stuff, but it's nice that it pulls itself out, demands that space, and it's very hard to miss. And then below that is the selection for the top section of the UI. Yeah, so it seems quite basic probably going over it, but yeah, like as you step through things, like if you said to me, why is that bit there, I should be able to answer it. And so I think that's kind of important. If you're skipping those middle steps on the atomic design thing, it's like when you do get to the pages side, it's just as important to maybe step through all of those parts. And that's hierarchy in itself. Like this UI has a hierarchy around importance and where things are. And then on top of that, obviously, it looks like a fairly regular UI, or I would say so, because conventions are really important. People look for things in certain places, so we follow that and then do what we need to inside that. So a little bit about like marketing and design. You probably have heard the objective benefits features model before, but if you haven't, that's all it is. But the idea is to avoid feature. And because you're not speaking to the reason or the outcome or the pain that the person has. So really the objective is the pain, the thing you're solving and the pain the user has. The benefit is the outcome, like what the thing might do. And then the features is how you go about doing it. And if I don't understand, if you haven't told me the pain you're solving and what outcome I'm going to get, I don't really care about your features yet. And so it's difficult. It seems really simple, but it's not easy to do. And I have to sort of struggle with this myself because it's really easy to make an application and lay out all the features and think everyone's going to read through them and read the manual and think it's cool, but software is about solving a problem, obviously, and getting that up front is really useful. So here's a really wonderful example of that. This is the landing page of Coda. You can go to their website and have a bit of a look, but that is the pain. Like it's even someone in pain a little bit. It's just perfect. I love it. This is a bit extreme. Like Coda are very popular, so they get the leeway to do this type of thing, and it's not useful to go and look at Slack's homepage or Stripe or someone like that because they're so big that they've got a bit of leeway. When you're trying to create something new or just trying to get it out there, you do have to be a bit more literal, but it's really nice to consider an extreme version of like if I was explaining what the pain is that I'm solving and only the pain, what would that be? And that's what they've done here. Like it doesn't say much else, but you're like, oh man, like yeah, spreadsheets, well, ugh, and then move on from there. If you're engaged in that, then you can move on to the next bit. And this is Avo code, and it's ratcheted down a lot more. It's save time working with design files, right? But if you're a designer working with design files, your entire life is time. So they've got it right. They've hit the nail on the head. Like you reap what you sow. It's a manual piece of work, and design files take ages to save, and they're complicated and they're annoying. And Adobe basically make their application crash on purpose, from what I can tell. But yeah, anyway, so like it seems very simple, but there's probably 100 things they could have written here, but they're really speaking to the objectives and the pain of a designer. And so trying to get back to a practical example around this, here you can see like this would be a classic little features section in a website. It might be a bit on the homepage, or it might be just a stack of features. And so, I can do online payments, and I've got some information about that. And if you want to learn more about online payments, like learn more, and then I've got a little picture of it, right? Very classic setup. But what I often see in this type of content is that the most interesting thing is actually lost in one of these other paragraphs. And so there's this a slightly different layout. I'll just flick between them like that. And you'll see this a lot, actually. If you look for it, you'll see it. It's a slightly different layout, but it just helps get across the most important things while getting the feature across. So online payments moves up to this like little caps locked bit. And then in the copy was fully integrated plug and play across all devices. That's interesting. That's way more interesting than online payments. Like in the context of this too, I stole this content from Stripe's website, but in that context, I'm on Stripe's website, or I'm on a piece of software. I went somewhere, I clicked on something about online payments, right? Or I searched for it. So the context is taken care of, and so give me something important or the next things I'm worried about. And so I see that a lot, is like something really interesting buried in like a second paragraph. And so it's just a nice little technique. And then And another subtle thing that's in there is that the first paragraph and the second one are slightly different sizes. And that's more hierarchy into that content. It just helps you read it. Like, it just tells you, like, yep, there's the big one and the smaller and whatever else. And then often the other thing that you get out of this is that button now, instead of saying learn more, says like integrate now. And often you find that the purpose of this section gets lifted up to the front a little bit more, up higher. And so you can make better call to actions on your buttons, and your whole website or app doesn't say learn more everywhere. It sort of speaks to its purpose a little bit more. So yeah, I really like that it's a little layout that you can just repeat forever, and you'll be able to fit content into that really easily. And so maybe extending that a little bit is if you're trying to lay out content, I mean design and communicating content about your projects. This is on the marketing design side. If you're struggling, if you've got all your features, but you're trying to figure out how to like do this objective benefit thing and talk about it, then a neat little way to do it is just surround the features in the benefit. You don't need to split off objectives and benefits perfectly and get that right to engage someone to move over. So an example of that is, this is from a website called Consultation Manager. This is one of my ongoing clients. And this is the website I did for them. So this is a section of the product tour page. And they have 3 main things their application does: record, track, report. So, and we frame everything inside those steps because that's their workflow steps, but it's also they're massively key parts of their software. And so, yeah, this section has record, a very simple section on recording so that you know what you're talking about. I've got some UI injected in so we know what we're talking about. I've injected some imagery so that this piece of software isn't sterile. Like, another small tip is like put people in everything because people love seeing people. It seems really simple, but like if you can go to a lot of software sites and there's just UI everywhere, and it's so effective just to jam a picture of a person in every now and again. Like, I went to Google Tag Manager website earlier, and Google do this a lot. Like, it's just a person sitting on a computer. Like, that's the main thing. And then like, yeah, it's Google Tag Manager. Like, there's nothing else going on, but they just put someone there who's using a laptop. That's all you need to feel like, yeah, I've got the context of this, and it feels nice to see that. I don't need to see the UI and that type of thing. And it's often the bigger players that do that a bit better, and because obviously they might have the reputation, but it's an effective thing you can do. Yeah, and so under that is the features laid out. So I've got the context right, I'm visually interested, and then I've got the features. You could, if you wanted to go and look at this website, it's there, consultationmanager.com, and you'll see these sections stacked down, and they've all got the same thing. So the homepage is different again, but this is the product tour page, but this could easily be like sections on a homepage. Or if you only had the one sort of thing one set of features you want to wrap up, this type of layout can be really effective. And you can see how it's just an extension of that smaller one. It's like lift up something important and then lead me down to the smaller parts and make sure the call to action makes sense. Like it's a lot about hierarchy. And so moving on to that, to another thing I just mentioned there, which is the UI shots. I think one of the best ways to get UIs into marketing is using what I think of or call augmented UI shots. So this is the Consultation Manager homepage, and you can see this image here. This is their dashboard, and then I've overlaid the cards. And so the key thing in their application is that you track people, you track the interactions, and you create actions, or you track actions based on all those things. So they're very interrelated, and they're all tracked, and then they're reported on. So I'm trying to visually pull that out of this application and it's just slightly augmented, like it's just overlaid, but they're all segments of UI. But that looks way more visually interesting than just a flat section of it or having to show multiple ones. And so just pulling out bits of UI can be really, really useful. If you can't figure out how to get a picture of a person in there or even mock it up, someone using it on an application, just pull stuff out and float it on top, basically. It's because, and I think this works because when you're building the application or designing that, you don't think of it in this context. It's not the context you're working in. You want it to be usable. And so it's not about, you're not making it flashy. And so this is a way to take what you've made, which is very functional and whatever, and is solving a problem, but then pull up the important parts and sort of try and pull up the workflow or the actions that are in it. Yeah, and it's really easy to do, even though if you're a non-designer, like it's really just, snipping out a part and pulling it on top. And I kind of went and grabbed a bunch of examples of this. Ugh! I went too far. Bup, bup, bup. Yeah, I just went and grabbed a bunch of examples of these, but this one is even a step further where it's sort of a more graphical version of it. So they've and we'll see this in the next view, like they take the text and they take the text out because you don't want to have to read text. It's like, no, we're trying to tell you that there's like tasks and there's like people against them, and that's all they want you to take away from that. The same thing, this is the same, this is Coda still, and you can see here they're just trying to tell you that like you sort of lay stuff out, like they're just trying to get one little thing across and they're stripping out everything else that isn't important. And this is the Adobe homepage, and so it's another level abstracted again, because it's like, well, what are we trying to show you? Like, well, it's productivity everywhere, so what do we do? It's like, well, it's multiple devices, but then there's all these little augmented bits laying over the top. And so you look at this and you go, okay, all devices, it's secure, I can edit text at some point, I can sign something, like it just all seeps in straight away because you've pulled that stuff out. If that signature was where you can see it's in the UI on the phone, if it was just left in there, I'd never see it, like I'd never care, but it pulls it up to the fore. This is another nice example, and it's got that content structure I was talking about, like little heading, main heading. And so, yeah, it's just very visually interesting as well when you put it next to an image. And this is actually animated. This is on pitch.com, but it doesn't matter. You can see, like, because the content relates to the control relates to the thing behind it. And so I had this idea. This is another untested idea for you, but I like coming up with sort of analogies and I guess it's like a mental model a little bit. So you've all probably heard of the funnel, right? Like the content, like the marketing funnel, like that's what SaaS especially is all about. Get people in the top of the funnel and you'll convert a certain percentage at the bottom and work on those steps down, right? And so that's really cool. That's like really useful for the sphere of traffic and converting and figuring all that stuff out. But what I'm trying to feed back against that is thinking about design and communication around your piece of software, right? And one model I really love, or an example that startups talk about all the time, is the elevator pitch. And I love that, not for the elevator pitch, not for pitching specifically, just for thinking about breaking down what it is you're talking about and getting really succinct. And if you don't know what that is, the elevator pitch is, I'm in an elevator with someone, and they say, what do you do? And you've got to explain this app you spent 5 years building. It's a bit like telling, if you've got a complicated job, like how do I explain that really quickly? But work on giving a 20-second answer to what is it that I do. Like Cameron, I don't know what you would say, but like, yeah, you must have that problem. And so, because it's like, oh, it's all these things connected, but it's like, whatever, like, yeah. And so, sorry, yeah, so the elevator pitch is really useful. And so the idea is that if you've got one floor, you've got this one bit of information. So know what it is when you explain what it is you're doing in that little block with one piece of information, but then also figure out if you've got more floors on the elevator to talk to someone, you get more information. So think through that. And it's not the bottom that's hard, it's the top. The one is really difficult, and that's why you don't talk about a feature, you talk about the objective, because you want to capture someone, you want to capture the essence of the idea or the pain, or capture their attention in what you're doing. And so I realized that shape really is a pyramid, which is kind of useful because like it helps you think about like the elevator pitch in a better way, I think. Like, yep, I've only got a little area to write down what it is I do, and then a bigger one and a bigger one. And if someone reads through them, like, how much area have I got to write? And so then I was thinking, like, this is, in terms of marketing and design, and especially websites, this is really useful to feed back against the funnel. So this is the funnel pyramid model. This is my idea, or pyramidal funnel. It's not great, but you've got to have a name. And so you can see if you overlay these things and you start writing your content to explain what you're doing, it could be quite useful. At the very top, when I start splashing information out into the world, I've got to get it really succinct and interesting and make sure that the people I want to get in are interested in that first little bit. And then when they click on that post or they move to the next thing, They're not going to read the entire website. They're just going to get to the next bit. So what is that? And so that's kind of like, this is why landing pages, like you guys have probably seen, like that you see full-blown websites, then you land on these landing pages that are just like, fill out this form, like just do it. That's all I've got. This is one thing, but they work because you're just into the next level and that's all you can engage with and that's all you're interested in and they really work. I don't quite like that, but that's why that works. And so it's really interesting just to think about this. And at the bottom is your converted user who has must have interacted with, you know, a bit of your features page and this and that and your pricing and your FAQs and that type of thing, but you don't get them up front. And so it's really nice to fill out that top triangle and progressively move it down. And really the easiest way is to start at the bottom and then start culling, and that's what you're doing. And that's what's painful about it, because it's really hard to cut out all this really useful stuff you've built into something or you think is interesting, but you've just got to cut it all away. And I find like this top part is really you're too close to a project to know what that is, and so you have to iterate towards that over and over and over and try out different things. So I hope that makes sense, because it made sense to me when I was sitting there putting this together. That's it. So yeah, I hope there's some useful stuff in there, and we'll muck around with brand synth. And thankfully it's very interactive, so I promise it'll be fun, but that's it.
Perfect. Really perfection, I think.
Cool, that's good.
We'll have a break, have something to eat, and then we'll play.
Let's do it.
Yeah, the layer shape is so good. You brought like you see size to a bit, and you're like, oh, sure, down on it. It looked like it's shit. Yeah.
Like looks completely different and it's like, yeah. So if you learn how to see.
Would have been a good Blastfurnace for you. Okay. Why? I already watched it. Feel on my brain a little bit for that, but I'm glad we actually did. I'll come back and watch it. Yeah. So like
Oh, I'm going to have to sign up for Blastfurnace media subscription. I'll get on it. Where are you putting these videos? We have a distributed network, so it's on YouTube, it's on the
and yeah, pull my finger out, they'll all be on. Some of them are already on the blastfurnace.com.au page. Hopefully all up there.
There's a Blastfurnace YouTube.
Blastfurnace YouTube is like, they go straight to that right now. They'll be there straight up.
Maybe that's right, Blastfurnace. True, but you can still vote for all. I get like oh, so that veto. Yeah, that's veto. It's usually a bunch of random and then always on that, like source files. You know, and it's the same shit, so I just got rid of it. So this is actually perfect because as you're talking, I'm making a change. It's like, it's okay. It's starting with it's just constantly scrolling. Like, no, not again. Like, this is mine. It doesn't line up basically. And I'm just removing a whole bunch of just have the same thing, just kind of useless. With the same, it's all because I got rid of you on my skin again. I'm like, you can't live so long.
We show you trigger?
Yeah.
We'll show you trigger.
Yeah.
Pretty much the only tree you want is the only like better is the work solution. So they're trying to present the like super functional, but it's like like with the graphics and like little parts of it like tree. Yeah, so I'm like cracking myself up. Like I really want to obviously you do like a tree it's like all made in the sense that you have that camera as a crosshair, so you use that to get your angle, and then you put in the distance you run from an object and draw the diagram and shows you what solution. That's not like high school. The teachers to use as a practical lesson for kids. But like we had to put in like just like a few little just like things you want to measure, click like tree, building, pole, or other. And so for each of the ones that have defined being like there's like a brick wall that grew, like little bricks come up, like a flagpole. Well, the flagpole originally I had the flag, just got the end pole, but the mass teacher was like, no, that we measured with the pole, we don't. So well, go back more to cool and make sense mathematically.
That's still getting light.
There's the actual stuff.
Oh, you're talking about
Like the tree, like a chunk.
I was thinking that.
yeah.
No, I come across where I had a submission, but it's
That needs to be something.
it just seems to like blend in.
That's why.
Essentially.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Pretty much like sort of capacity.
Yeah, like craft judgments.
Oh, that's good.
I've never used a flow look button.
Yeah, I just shared with actually favorite teachers about like this could be considered shows you capacity no idea. They'll actually either have this like pull out and just like that. And that would be okay. Oh, because it's yeah.
A new tech that we're on. Strength.
It's going.
It's happening.
It's going. I think that we just signed the new office space.
Yeah, cool.
So we have 6 people and 4 chairs. 7 people and 4 chairs.
I was just like rotating on that or something.
It's been rough.
Yeah, programming. Yeah, phone calls get off with like interviews.
Zoom calls.
So,
Where's the new space?
in the labs in Wigan. So, we're going in class with Campbell.
Oh,
Class 12 forward.
alright. Well, they moving to they do bigger space.
Yeah,
They've got like 30 people, don't they?
they're probably close to
Wow. You're going halves. That's right.
Yeah, we're going to go too way too much.
Yeah, we've gone from 0 space to.
We're going to have heaps of plant desks.
Yeah,
Just plants everywhere.
I think desk capacity on that floor is wow.
It's better than 4.
Yeah,
So.
it's just, like it's maybe it's 5, but I would really strongly prefer that step than just like this sort of space we probably have 4 people. That can not expensive.
But we usually you and me in the office.
Yeah, but now we've got other new person like and they have to be in the office.
Where is that?
How many square meters?
Like I'm not exaggerating when I say this.
Oh, yeah, the new space.
It's
Have to be at least 200 square.
oh, you mean the new one? Yeah. Alright. It's
Up to the edge.
just I don't know.
Ready to take
Which equals do you guys actually?
Everyone's
There you go.
I've seen almost
Actually, this week doesn't have
watching you guys.
through. So yeah, this is us essentially. Wraps along. These are ish. That's just got a run through it. It's built this for me.
Sometimes
It is. It's not like perfect. It's like, well, I think it's like this is too much fun. You'll probably do it if you have this boxes and you play it with tomorrow. So we'll share this one. That's what people have. Also, that's they did a video on that. I mean, they've got an Nexus or something. Some kind of running meetups. Pretty much. But it was like just a strip of steel on something there, steel, and like a hot water with like liquid nitrogen in it, but also lining all for heating to extent. Asian very fun. So good. So you guys on this one?
Whole space.
Oh no,
Take this whole little thing.
So right now,
You can see it moving outside.
our entire office space stands currently 80. We have seven sides.
Technically 6 would be sense.
But like, and 7 people, I would say, on. Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah, this is that's crazy. So we'll start with their work.
I think you have
Well, that's
to
what
work
we
from home.
it's hard. We'll try and onboard it. Like we've had this on for 5 days. I'm just trying to get him up to speed like recruit like the CRM that we use for recruiting is just all Australian. Yeah. That's right. So and the documentation is not associated. Yeah. So
I'm actually not all of
the
it.
stuff you've done in weeks is
It is actually very good.
the rest is bad.
It's a 60-page ballistic read that has that it sucks.
Yeah. You're right. We just can be unexpected.
It was meant to be a lot shorter than that.
Yeah. He just needs to sit with something and just watch.
But I did a fresh produce instance. I'm completely new to this, so
Crunching that data,
like to the area or
Actually, we just have to get our data up to state because it can't be
yeah, well,
definitely
these ones are probably ones that use it navigate.
look at that.
it's really it's a good day. You make like up to 6,000, 7,000 or something. Especially for ridiculous.
But I think if you're running into a lot, you need to have some sort of grasp of it. Yeah, CLI. It's just something.
But yeah, this one is like also so you'll run a management on your office. Yeah, a similar issue with running out of space.
But as a
Running out of desk. So quick and then half it's boxes just falling off. Workshops just.
we've got some.
Yeah, like on the things you usually or like
what do I say? For example, so if you want to
could you without
some really run like
trying to tell you the solution first. You can just move down to 8 tables. I'm pretty sure we should around to so it's okay. There you go.
there's always varies to some.
And then there is a workshop there, but the skewer reason and structure, I'm pretty sure it's parking in some way. Yeah, like there's already location. Yeah.
Now we get straight.
Just leave. So they're like, it's just like, interesting stuff. And usually what kind of makes myself money is like a voice check. You're all interesting things I'm asking. And they're coming from all over the place. From Queensland, it's like a 21 Sydney, Sensors, Orange, and Fremont, like international. Interesting where they come from. What's the marketing versus all work now? What it is, but also got a tag. Yeah,
Actually, it was.
that's what it comes through there. Like, this was all they have skills about it. So it's like all these EVOs online directly or flash on this listening. That's right.
And it's like also like the basic is just if they show up this week, we'll flash the noise quite quick. Plug it in all for sure.
But in terms of the
Basic way, so the open source version of Excel, Word, I mean, yeah, that would be like a security camera. Yeah, network security.
It's like bigger role as well. Sure.
Single wall, that's good.
Yeah, people buying really cool. So back, yeah, I'm sure it's going to you just see much different. Yeah, it's very good. Like it's like you can just want to. It's like all just sort of what models who eat it and how it's like it's just one of them. I don't know. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's now. We see those as easy. Like you said, like beauty. So you can design like one year history program. And the after sales tool, it's going to be see what's really something. But actually, know what you're doing. It's not random. It's just like security. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can even do the brain system. Yeah.
One on the front door, one on the back door, and working with USB cameras.
I wonder if what they should do. Because you have a
No, I think it's a lot of
So I made it secure in the sense that it runs on their local network, so I don't really access it.
Yeah, I tried to close the ticket the other day, but they closed the ticket button was just broken. I was like unsure if I should spin it up.
I probably put something in the box so I can test it.
it's a key solution. Yeah.
Seems like an important question.
Well, it's all about raspberry.
Yeah, and it's testing is talking to
Pretty much. Pretty much. Especially when you're given like a free Apple versions of the software position. Yeah. Just call it out. Yeah. You know.
Oh, I haven't had it yet. I haven't used it.
Give that to me. Yeah, exactly. Just handle some shit for anything. Just went fix everything.
Please, here's this big pile of mess. Look at all of
They're all
it's actually like shocking on the side. There's people in it. There is no bureaucracy anywhere. There's no process at all.
Yeah, you can do what you want.
And
You don't have to.
yeah. It's like it's, I am the bureaucracy. I am the red tape. Crazy. Now the government's like, yeah, I've already sent 2 emails today. I'm pretty much
So it's like
guy that was at your bottom bar, progressively got angrier at this take breaks. And you take a break every 4 or 5 minutes or something. Yeah. Yeah, and then it would get angrier and angrier. And then it would like show up as extreme exercises for doing
and if you miss that, you get to a point of lock you down, so you're forced to take like 40-minute break.
Yeah, you just have to wait.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Especially if it's like, yeah. Yeah, you can also get yeah. So on the it's like super
Yeah.
and he said they send out like fake malware, but they send them out and test it. You're like, yeah, you like, you got a doctor, that's how it comes. It's really interesting because like that's like crazy. You just like I get the idea, but he was like, yeah, you get more trouble when you click on the African prince. Someone there was a company that did that recently and got like the emails drafted and been like, oh, we're doing really well. He's we can give everyone $1,000 bonus. Here's your Christmas bonus. Yeah. And then click on it. Yeah. He's the captain of mandatory training and security. And he got like that's over the top. Because that's a good way to train. And the point of those like to say that is to pepper in enough tells that they will pay attention to the exactly. But this was coming from the first party domain. It was coming from someone who's right by the company. No spelling mistakes. It's all very good. I think the only tell is that the link went to a slightly malformed. It'll run it. It was a URL that required me really close to the same thing.
You have to hover over the link. Check for it. Yeah.
So and you are.
Because my dad, like, he's a control system engineer, so he's a lot of he has to he stops and understand like the clues are there, there's definitely something. Like something like a weird sponge. He's like, I don't remember doing it all the time. He's like, it's just that's really interesting. It seems like quite a harsh thing to protect you from maybe it's not big deal like for me.
It depends.
Yeah.
Sarah has so much. About the largest platform in Australia. They're basically the same when it comes to their intellectual property protection.
Yeah, that's like it's other things. And if you go into crazy, really high, so
which is bad.
That's why it's so straight. Not because I was every company around and I think they talked about cybersecurity. They said that they don't like 32% of the experts. Similar sort of principle. And they kind of went a bit of deep dive who clicked on the link, who didn't click on the link. Who clicked and then reported to someone else. And there was like a really disconcerting proportion of people who technical things. And very little I've remembered and then it's just not common. The report rate for people looked like 3%. it's just interesting to see how much you guys.
Well, yeah, I have to say that those people are it's like they make often shit off.
Yeah,
It can't really hurt me.
yeah.
Yeah, I know how to close with really strong colors. It's like really shitty sides there, so okay. Yeah. My boss is a teacher, like, they should just walk around the US paying drugs, can you take a photo of this? And like, no, it's not what you have.
Well, I reckon these days you should be able to take a USB from like a fair or a conference or anything.
Oh, right, yeah, just then like,
It's really easy to program because look like, you know, Ethan was like shit all the time.
Well,
It makes more than USBs.
yeah,
or something.
yeah, you just look like you whatever.
Yeah, you can make like malicious Wi-Fi signals, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Which all learns through email. Just
Yeah.
operating
Yeah. It's a dodgy thing.
Yeah.
now I'm like super weird.
Touching the
Don't have to look at it. Don't connect to Wi-Fi you don't know. Don't connect to Wi-Fi you do know, which shouldn't be in the area. It's like excludes that as well.
Oh, yeah. So that's why I think serious spike off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, I'm aggravated now. I don't have any.
Yeah, definitely avoid that time. Do not accept the EPS from now on.
All the time. Let's be slowly as if I don't have access to the
I live in a games and leave the round. If I just secure I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, yeah. At some point, it's
No, we don't want to slow it down, so
yeah.
because they off the computer.
bank as well, and then it
There's something like it's like that's fine. It's like you're special. Like it's like I get it. It's like it's just it's one of those things. It's like we're all like okay, that's fine. It's a specific target.
I'm a bit worried about it, I'm sure, like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I just love it. My wife's definitely coming out. Why? Like, you only look at the kind of
you're the freaks on the internet.
teaching downloads. No, I know. Like, there's real reasons to do it. It's just like the intensity of it. So, like, yes, take that up. Close up the toilets. That was great. I just like, I do get both. I'm already
Too late.
it's too late. I'm honestly conscious. Like, it's too late. And I like my content.
Yeah, even just give them more data points to just
Yeah.
throw it off the track.
That's cool. At least that's
What I always think about like Google advertisements, how they try to target ads, I just think of the most random shit. It's just whatever pops into my mind. When I'm looking at the algorithm, I'm like, it's good. I mean, Captain is good one, yeah.
Which one the algorithm is too slow?
Just like in current interests.
Yeah. See, like, so I usually Google things without me preparing. So, like, I bought myself like a graphics card. And for the next 3 months, because all my ads are just like this graphics card.
Yeah.
Well, this graphics card.
The retargeting
It's already gone.
Yeah. They never go seeking to it. Like, you buy something from me about like a holy trap, and then they're like, like, no, I want the next thing the other person bought.
Yeah, like they
How are they not there yet?
Flash or
Yeah, like
or something.
like carry bags for I'm like,
People are also interested in.
yes, exactly. It's like because they have that on. It's just interesting. Like the retargeting just doesn't have that. Like the use of it. People like.
That's probably.
Until someone would actually do something doing it. You know, delete it until it's all I need.
Yeah.
I leave history until the end of time. All time. That's a swing check box. It's kind of the effective. Effectively,
I did it on my radio.
Yeah.
Oh.
I passed it. What if I forget the password?
The one in Milton Road?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
we would not like to. That's where's that?
I just think Google has all my information anyway. Like, if anyone knows everything about you, it's Google. So why not just Google it?
Yeah, that's
Speak
like.
the base, you know?
Yeah. Don't already Skype it.
Yeah.
Might as well get
Well, then they give it back to you. They make it password packages.
It's
Right.
nice, yeah.
Just give back the use.
It's like if you're going to harvest my data, I'm going to know how to get places
Yeah.
faster, and
Yeah.
I'm going to know how to get into my place.
Yeah, let me log in and tell me what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It's all said on what I have to do while you're at work. It's like, oh, I can do it right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Dan knows this it's 3 seconds. It's just like, yeah, sure.
I switched to it. Which one?
Have you heard of the Facebook? Okay, it's like every search you do, right?
Oh, actually, I have, yes. Yeah, because I use their model to actually play games, which is nice.
Feels nice. You need more.
You're welcome. There's like the one that's also a dark mode browser. You're saving this much power. I don't know, but it just uses a dark mode.
Oh, kind of like use the Parameters unreleased dark mode. So you put like a secret flag into the command box and it says it's dark.
That's cool.
But like it's kind of buggy. Because like it doesn't invert everything. So you know when you on the dark mode it's that you like the text is white.
Yeah.
Right? Or like shaded blue.
The nice light.
Yeah. Not black. It's
No, black or black.
Yeah. So that's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah. Dark mode can chrome this and integrate it to all sides. So there's like one side that has black and one black says.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Not really that.
I've got to highlight everything.
And
Just
then,
control all of it, control A if you want.
yeah,
Control everything.
I saw my onboarding email that I used to do every day. This email is like centering the group that everything. It's like it just enable my beautiful email. Because it takes the images and images in person, but it doesn't do a very good job. It's trying its best.
Start designing weird emails in like dark theme.
I can't just plain text it.
Dark theme.
Excuse me.
Like, you know, bold navigation bar.
Yeah.
Why don't you make like what like light red ones to make everything dark?
Like, I know it's a fairly simple email anyway, but it's just like, it was totally mental. It's really like, his email's like, oh, yeah, I've seen those that work in England, but then I hadn't considered something really good. I'm still not going to make it. I'm just going to leave here where everything looks nice.
I guess I'm trying to fix mine.
There's no design ever. Yeah, dark mode is always.
I know, it pops up as a glitch now, like it's put out as a glitch.
People just love dark. I love dark mode because lights give me headaches. So I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah, like we're becoming more like situated on the screen.
Yeah.
Like it's dark mode.
Yeah.
You can switch
I want my retinas to survive it.
Have a go playing with the software.
Are you the software to play with?
Go for a live tech demo.
I'll check demo.
Depends what you pick.
Everybody design dark mode theme, please. Light mode.
Do you want me to put this on again?
Yeah, that's it. It's a very
Right.
short range.
Are we recording this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll just do it in a bit. Jesus.
Fine. You just kill everyone with it. They're all dead, that's all. Everyone to know you installed 1,000 Reddit screen out.
Yeah, if you want to have a look at it, it's at app.brandsynth.com, or you can just go to brandsynth.com and hit the green button, surprisingly, that says try it free.
Dusk mode.
Yeah. If you'd like a dark mode, take your laptop outside. Yeah, so I might just zip through a brand. It only takes like a moment. So if I start my brand, we jump through our 5 steps. And I have, let me just double check that I've got Safi on my computer. Oh, I haven't got any images for Safi. All right, let's pick a different one. All right, so the Greater Bank looks pretty good. I can't remember what their tagline is. So, add my tagline and my information. And you can add some colours. So we've got like a simple palette that you can pull from, or a full colour mixer for those who like to mix it. We can do solid and gradient colours. But if you, like I have at the moment, if I have a logo or I've got a brand that I'd like to actually put in there, then I can extract the colours from an image, which is just a nice feature. So I'm going to do the Greater Bank. So if I throw in their logo, we'll pull out their colour palette, and then I can chuck that in, and I might add a gradient. Whoop, there we go. Bank gradient. And yeah, we've got up to 6 colours, but we'll stick with it. Oh, I might put a grey in actually, it's a bit of fun. Here's a blue shifted grey for you. Here's how you do it. You find blue, you go down to black. You go down to black, and you don't pick black, and you come up like this, and you go, that looks nice. Yeah, just where the blue meets the black is quite good. But my hue keeps changing. All right. And then I can add my logo. Well, actually, in BrandSynth, we have upload your own logo if you have that, and then we have a font logo creator. So tonight, if you may not have assets on your computer, but you can come in here and make yourself a cool as brand. And you can muck around with this. There's a few settings and alignment and text sizes and colors that you can muck around with. But I have got logos at the moment, so I'm going to put those in. And when you add a logo like this, we throw it up on the colors that you also selected, and you select what appropriate backgrounds there are for that logo. So I'll just zip through. And if you've ever got a logo created and supplied, you get a few versions of it, usually an inverted color set.
So when you're putting an AI file,
yep.
Is it the artboard itself?
No, that's actually an SVG. It's just that Adobe is defaulted to my. Sorry, that's right. So yeah, these are SVGs at the moment. It's just that my computer would open them in Adobe. Yeah, So each logo has their appropriate background color selected, and you can come back and adjust this anytime. And so then we've got Google Fonts here, ready to look good, and then some imagery for the grader. And if you do not have some imagery, we have Unsplash, which is a free stock library. And everyone needs happy people in their brand. So now I've got all the steps validated. I can go and preview this brand. And you have to sign up, which I'm not going to sign up. I'll just sign in. Excuse me a moment. I've got one of those if you'd like one. So I'll sign in, and I know that I've already got the Greater Bank in here, so I'll just jump back to that. So once I do that and sign up, I'll land on my this is our preview page. So we've got, you'll see these designs rotating, and these are in mock-ups for you to have a look at, and then you can actually hover over them to get a bit of a closer look at the designs. But yeah, it's nice to see things in use. So especially when you work with a designer to get something made, like a logo, like we mock them up on in situ in design, so you can see how they're going to work. Yeah, very useful way to view things. And so yeah, these are the documents we create currently. So business cards, social media profiles, pull-up banners, email signatures, letterheads. We create a style guide for you as a reference and do the color conversions. And coming up, we've got many documents coming up, but one of the key ones is flyers and DLs, and then a website holding page. And then to view the designs, well, I won't jump there at the moment, but the other thing that we've got is the content for the brand is held here. So we pre-populate all the brand content, so that tagline and the contact details, and then any team members, we pre-populate the cards with these details. So the email signature and the business cards, for example. I come down here and select a front, and I can select a back, and then I can export this, but I can pick a team member or add a new one, and then I can adjust the size, and you'll see here that every design is really dynamic. So if I change the size, they all change. They're all changing only a little bit at the moment, but I can also come in here and have a little bit of configurability over the content, and I can adjust how I get, what kind of PDF I get out of that. But yeah, these are the design, so we algorithmically and automatically design all of these, and we do a lot of work with each asset to figure out what type of design it would fit in, and all of the heuristics and patterns that I would use manually are at play here to create these. And so, yeah, you can see we permute through these, and if a design doesn't look good, if there's a pattern or a style that we've got that doesn't look good, you won't see it. So these are already pre-culled essentially for good design in inverted commas, because it's a bit subjective, but not really, because there's patterns to it. Yeah, and you'll see across so social media profiles. Here are the covers, and so the other thing that we do is that all of our I call them motifs, the main styles that we have, we carry through all of the different documents. So when you have a brand and you've got a bit of a style and a selection that you like, you can maintain that consistency throughout everything that you create. That's the idea about staying on brand. So pull-up banners, same idea. You can adjust the size, and email signatures. And so each document is exported in the right format. So email signatures are all HTML, CSS. They work in every email client. You can download a file for that, or you can just copy it straight into your email client. Letterheads we do in a Word document and PDF. And then here's our style guide. And I'll just show you a little example of some of that design configurability at play, or some of the heuristics. So you'll see here, I've got my Facebook profile and cover selected, and if I go InDesign, the size is different, and Twitter. But if I go YouTube has a really messed up spec for their image. They have one massive image, and then they crop the center out of it for mobile and TV. The big one's TV, and then mobile and desktops, this really little sliver. And so if I change that, you'll see that that's coded into that design, into that YouTube spec. It'll adjust all of the designs based on that specification. And so the ethos of BrandSynth is that these designs don't break. You can't break them as a user, and they're always perfect for the spec that you're about to export them at. And you'll see this design here, we've got the logo and the tagline floated next to each other, and that background image. So it was able to cover the rest of the area, even though it's quite large. But this design here, this is what we call a crop design. It has this divider and it has an area defined. And so to fit into the YouTube model, that image can't be, you can imagine it can't expand out to the right and just end in nowhere. So we've got a defined area which exactly matches the YouTube desktop one and the mobile one. And then we've sort of on brand, blanked out the rest of the image, or made it look good whilst trying to adhere to the design. But you can see that particular design on its own just shifts around as it needs to. And the YouTube one is obviously quite a wild change for it, but every design has that. And so as you come in and if I get a business card and I can actually adjust the size quite specifically. We can adjust the bleed and the size of it. And while some of it might be a bit extreme, everything is in there and has a go at fitting, and you can adjust it all if you like. The other thing we have, which we're really interested in and proud of, is if you're about to print this, like, we're trying to help you create these documents, and so we have a vendor, an inbuilt vendor list of business card producers here. So you pick your country, and then you would pick a vendor that we have preloaded, so like Snap Printing, for instance, and then you can select this, and we've set the bleed area, the trim area, the safe area, the card size ready for them. And so you can change to Officeworks, and they offer a few other design sizes, and you go bang, and it goes, yep, right, perfect. And so we've set everything in there that would be right, and you can adjust your team member and some information, and then export. And you know that that's perfectly right, and it'll be automatically upscaled, 300 DPI resolution, CMYK colors, all the print specs taken care of. So it's good to go. And every document, that's our ethos. So that's BrandSynth, and you can see if I jump around to a couple of other brands that, yeah, you can get a bit out of it, and it's really nice once you change the atoms of the brand. You can get quite a bit out of it. Campify. I'm using the wrong logo there apparently. Pegasus. And we can put I believe we've got our own brand in here. So there's BrandSynth. Let me just I'll just download this. This is our designer creating our work for us. And there we have it. Print ready. Ready to go. So, the brand editor button is over here on the left with the other brand settings if you want to find it. But yeah, you can come in here if you'd like to have a muck around with it. It's it's quite fun, and you can adjust. I'll purchase this one, but you can adjust adding colours and having a bit of fun with some sort of interesting combinations of colours and logos. You can get quite a bit out of it if I come over here and sort of select this and then come and have a look at it. You'll see I get that variation, and, you know, good or bad, it's there. And so it's quite fun to play with. And we do a couple of things like with images. If we detect transparency in them, there's different designs you'll get in them because they obviously have a different purpose. They're not just a photo. And so there's a few designs you may not see depending on the inputs you get. But yeah, that's BrandSynth. So have a bit of a look.
Yeah, it's really cool. The style kind of thing. I was thinking from more of a software perspective. Being able to generate software UI.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah, and one of the things I'd like thinking about adding a lot is essentially a style sheet, an application UI style sheet, like pre-made. Like, because in a brand sense, you sort of might pick a primary and a secondary color, but a UI requires, like we were looking before, requires like 6 greys and a 3-level tint of the primary, and there's a bunch of useful heuristics there for some of the colors you might use. So.
But you could take the two, and I think like I said, the 2 colours, and like you said, like, that might be a bit opinion, like based on your opinion, I guess to some extent. But you could take the 2 and just, all right, we know the text is going to be blue shift, and just shift things a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And yeah, because it's not super complicated, and it's just you need that palette, and then it's a bit like that where we went through the UI before. We had the different button styles too. It's like it could generate that more complex palette and give you all of those to use instead of just ending up with the 2. Like just hit start with all of those. Yeah, because there's projects like. And there's one called MVP CSS, which I really like, which is it's like super lightweight style sheet, but it's exactly that. It's all the high level variables taken care of, and then you can like come in and adjust it. So it'd be that type of idea. Yeah.
cost of like
It is 89 US at the moment, so it's about 120 bucks. It's for a year, but yeah. So essentially, you get everything in our core document set, which is everything at the moment, and we'll add a few more things. Yeah, and so like it's depending on your interaction with design in the past, it's an easy cost to justify. Like if you ask me to make you a business card, like it's going to take me sort of 2 hours, 3 by the time we muck around with files and get back to each other. And so, that's 150 bucks, pretty easy. And this is 120, and you can do it yourself. Plus, you get an email signature and a pull-up banner and a this and that. So it's really that scale and whilst the design of us designing things automatically is interesting, obviously that's the first interesting thing about it. The production of the documents is actually what's really key next, because print-ready files aren't easy to make for a non-designer, and we automate it. So, I mean, as a designer, I love it. I like making print art is annoying. Basically, like it's a section of work I have to think of and take care of. So, it's totally automated here. I've been using BrainSynth to do real work, which is great. Like when I have to do social media profiles and stuff, I don't do them anymore. I just put them in and get it out. It's awesome. So, yeah. And if anyone has any opinions on what we should make next, I'd like to hear it. We can make anything. So, yeah, what's next? Like, we know that DLs and flyers are interesting, and social posts, email templates, signage, flags, banners, extending from that pull-up banner, web ads, so all of those drastically weird long sizes, MREX leaderboards, we're doing those, stickers. Good. Splash screens. Yeah, the App Store listing images. Yeah.
If there was software I could just take the screenshots.
Yep.
And be like, here are all the screenshots. Can you give me my Android kit and my
Yep.
iOS kit?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You see, like most of the cool ones are just like they're pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, it's
the screenshot inside that
coloured thing and then a little title. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are. Yeah, exactly. And you might, and then we could. Yeah, we could do the continuous UI where they put the phone on the angle and it goes between two. Yeah, no, that'd be. Andrew would probably say that's trivial. So no, that's it. That's a good one. I think as we expand our documents, what we'll do is split off packs to verticals, because you're a software person, so there's a whole section of things we could do for you there.
I think there is a development.
Yeah. Section. Yeah.
You cater for already in some aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, that UI design document would be just a couple of key colours, and then just like you said, blue shift, here's your headline, then to
Yeah, just that whole Adams page, that example one I had before, just spit out that. And I mean, and then obviously we could provide 5 or 6 different styles. Yeah.
But the recently.
Yeah, because they're very specific. Like they won't accept it without the right specs and everything. That I've had to make them a few times.
So just like so iOS alone, 5.5 inch screen, 6.5 inch screen, 4.9 inch screen.
Yeah.
I think there was 2 types of 12.9 inch.
Yeah, there's the different iPads and then yeah. And then splash screens. Like I had to make splash screens a lot, and there's a whole set. Like it's like the whole head. There's a whole meta section in the head, and there's all those different image sizes for all the different device sizes.
Yeah.
You just like try and spit those out. Yeah. And there's like the thing that we're excited about with BrainSynth is that there's applications that just do business cards, and there's applications that just do email signatures, and there's little apps out there for stuff like that. But we're aggregating all of that into one thing, and so yeah, it's all about consistency. You don't have to jump around all that stuff and try and make it consistent, because that basically becomes impossible. Whereas like we can code in consistency and lock you in, and then add a bit of flair around that and help you do some configurability. So yeah.
So the 89 is annual subscription, 89 US.
Yeah,
And
that's for one brand. Yeah, so that's for that brand, and then unlimited downloads of everything that we have. The only restriction is that it's that one brand, basically. Yeah. Yeah. Which, if you were going to go and make a business card or a pull-up banner or something, it's sort of it's basically paid for itself before. Yeah, once you make something. Yeah. So yeah.
all right, yeah, no, thanks again, Luke, for the first presentation. Yeah, really good one. A bit different for us,
Yeah.
which is really good, a bit of variety, but I think the value, definitely from a software perspective is there, but because it is something you struggle with, and unless you work at a big company and you have a UX team, you don't care, you just ask for mock-ups and you make it. But
Yeah.
certainly for smaller businesses or people just trying to create their own apps and interfaces, just to have some rules. It's like you said, like you just want a couple of rules, just a couple of things, like to think about. Like if it's not looking crap, I just want to refer to just a bunch of dot points and be like, which one of these is I want to adhere to?
Yeah, and to me, design is like 60% rules, like hard and fast rules anyway. Like all these like ways of doing things and laying things out, and the rules we have they're very rigid. It's the stuff after that where you get to have some fun, but they're good to know.
As a designer, are there any? I think obviously you have to keep up with your UI UX trends. Are there anything you follow in particular, or do you?
Try and ignore trends.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to change your app too many times.
Yeah, that's true.
So they're kind of interesting. Like a lot of the trends get driven by places like Dribble or like small apps that shove out stuff that it's like a single function app or something. And so it's very skewing, I think.
Yeah.
But then like what's going to come out now is, I can't remember what they call it. We just went through. It's like I can't remember what they call it now, but Microsoft. Have you seen Microsoft's new design? Their glass UI type stuff that they've got.
I've seen it in the new Windows terminal app.
Yeah, but like they're releasing a sort of new design style at the moment, and it's this like you'll see things blurred behind translucent panels now everywhere, and it's really nice and interesting. But it's hard to replicate actually.
What's it?
I can't quite remember what it's. I can't remember what it's called. But
glass or something. Sure, glass.
Yeah, it's like the Microsoft thing will be separate to them. What the trend is called, I just can't remember. Like, I can probably find it. Because we just went through new morphism. I don't know if you saw that, but it's like that was like trying to get more tactile stuff back.
That was like where buttons were sort of pushed through.
Yeah, they're like it's like a membrane or something. Yeah. And so this is that, but there's no membrane. It's all glass panels. Basically, it's that type of thing. Yeah, and it is really cool. It's just like all these things just get used up they get used too much. It's a bit like the hierarchy thing. They only use that, and they add too many things together, and it's just like that's all you see. I don't know how to find this now. Sorry. I watched this is the kind of problem with Feedly is like I just live on Feedly, like looking at stuff, and I'll go through an article. That one wasn't interesting enough to say.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. I guess that was actually a question before. So like Feedly is a good one to.
Yeah.
You want to see interesting things.
I use that. Like, I mean, you have to feed in what you're going to look at a little bit, but design's a funny one because it's like Feedly, like a news feed. Yeah, it's used to be called something else. yeah, you just throw in websites. It's like you make your own private blog. That's probably how you could think of it. Yeah, designs like there's also these like old rules that have been around forever, and then there's just these new styles on top that get sort of added, and that's where the trends come from. But they can be really useful, like because how does a map look modern? Like that's a bit of probably a hard question to answer, but I don't know, it's sort of not, because it's like they I think a modern app looks like it's had touch considered because it has to, or it's responsive, like at the very least, and that changes how it looks drastically. Because if you think about that, like brand synth is certainly not perfect, but it is responsive. Like it works. You know, this isn't the type of app that you might use on your phone. You wouldn't create it on your phone. You could jump in and download something, but it's responsive, right? So, but that influences how everything's put together, and so that's probably one of the biggest things, because that was the hardest shift for adaptive design. Couldn't keep up with the amount of screens, and so then we went into responsive designs, and the technologies followed, and then we had screens everywhere of different sizes. And so that like influences design all the time. That's why that content next to an image thing, like you see that over and over, because it's super effective, because you can stack it really easily, and you can just then center it, and it's just really effective. Effective to read, nice to look at, works across browser sizes. Yeah.
All right, yeah, just give Luke a round of applause for coming in and be able to, it'll be up on the YouTube channel, and I'll send you a copy or whatever, and
Sounds good.
cut it together and use it for whatever you want to use it for.
Yeah. Train up someone.
That's right, yeah, that's right.